Abigail. What are we talking about today?
Today, we wanted to talk about how we as parents can help rebuild hope for ourselves and our children when we are confronted with shocking events.
It's a big one, but it's a one that's necessary, I feel like.
Unfortunately, yes.
Hi, I'm Elle Kwan in Hong Kong, and I'm your host of the Hand in Hand podcast. We're a non-profit from San Francisco operating globally, and we decode children's difficult behaviors one parenting challenge at a time.
And I'm Abigail Wald, founder of realtimeparenting.com, and also a certified hand-in-hand parenting instructor. And each week, Elle and I like to get together to take a look at how we use the hand-in-hand parenting tools in our real lives. And also sometimes you write to us about your lives. And today we wanted to talk about something that affects all of us all over the world, whether it be natural disasters or acts of senseless violence. There are moments when our communities or our families are rocked to the core. And we wanted to talk about those moments and share some thoughts with you that Patty Whitfler, the founder of Hand in Hand, had put together a number of years ago and that we've unfortunately had to share with a little bit more frequency lately. But we wanted to have a good resource for you. So
Abigail, I think we're going to focus today not on the events themselves, but more about what we can do when, as parents, we have trouble making sense of these situations as well.
Yes.
What do we want to pass on to our children? How much should they know? And really, what can we do to pull together and feel a bit better and more hopeful?
Yeah, exactly. So here are a few thoughts about caring well for our children and ourselves during difficult times. So one of the things is that we have to take care of ourselves first. We really do. It's kind of like that, put on the oxygen mask for yourself first. We are that rock for our children. And when things rock us to our core and we're off our game and we're uncentered, it really helps if we can reach out to other caring adults first and start to get some of our rawest feelings out away from our children.
Yeah, I think that's so essential to take away some of the rawness of the emotion out of the family unit, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think we can be honest with our kids and share with them like something really sad happened today and I have a lot of feelings about it, or I heard something on the news. And, when they ask questions about what, you can be age appropriate and always give as little information as you can get away with giving, right? And older children will ask more. But we want to be as uncolorful and as factual and simplistic and only what's necessary. Maybe it's somebody did some things that hurt other people and that just made me sad.
Yeah, I think that, even if we're saying you are positioning yourself as someone who is going to protect them, can reassure them, but it's not a bad thing for them to know that you have feelings and reactions as well.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. I think it's important for our kids to know that we care and we have feelings and we get upset too. And yeah, it's that rawness, right? It's that sense of us completely losing it, spinning out of control that can be so really just scary, right? Yeah, it's about taking space because we certainly deserve to have those raw moments and just finding another adult we can have that moment with first.
So I think as well, children, can be really rocked even by images that they see, stories that they hear. Some kids are picking up newspapers or they're on the internet and they see this stuff. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think it's something to definitely be aware of, right? Those visuals can be really hard to get out of your brain. The news is really sensationalistic sometimes, and sometimes these events themselves are pretty intense. And so, certainly it's hard enough for us to process, but for their young brains, it can be really hard. So I definitely would suggest, and Patty suggests as well in her thinking that we do shield kids from media as much as possible. And that might mean if you have a young child who has a phone, that maybe we say, hey, listen, there's a lot of grown-up stuff happening right now. So I'm gonna take this for a little bit, okay? Or just maybe you block certain sites if you can, or, it depends the age of your child and the sensitivity of your child, and what's best for each of your individual families. But definitely just wanted to call a little awareness around really noticing where they're getting this information from.
And I think sometimes it doesn't play out in an obvious way. Sometimes they do come to you and say, Mom, I heard about this. What's happening? Why did this happen? But other times you might just feel that things are not going very smoothly. Your child might have become more clingy, or, defying you more. And actually that is kind of those images or those thoughts and suggestions, or that fear and scaredness that they've taken in and kind of eternalized. And it comes out in these other ways, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Children will have different reactions to this, right? Sometimes some of them will just kind of shake it off. But they're, as you said, they might even get more rigid all of a sudden.
Right.
Or they might get more clingy. Some kids have a reaction of like bravado, like, I would have taken him down, or I could have survived that earthquake, right? And so different kids will really react differently. And something interesting can happen for us as parents, which is sometimes when we are dealing with these really big grown-up things that are just, they're not even okay for our grown-up brains, right? I mean, people hurting people simply doesn't make sense. Earthquakes, floods, landslides, destroying entire towns, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for us either. And so when we're in that place and our kids are now suddenly like crying more about the pink cup,
right?
It's like, that can really trigger us. Like, oh my gosh, you have no idea what real troubles there are in the world. And we just kind of wanted to bring up that can be a child's way of addressing that same feeling, right? That kind of lack of control that we feel in that moment, they may be feeling that too. And they don't know all the things about the world that we know. And so it's not going to come out the same way. It's not going to look the same way. It'll get sort of transferred to these little tiny upsets, or these kind of broken cookie moments, broken cookie pretexts about, other little tiny things that they're going to get really upset about. And so as much as possible to hold the awareness that these things are not as superficial as they might seem. This is actually your child working through their own perception of that lack of control and the fear that can bring on, and the hopelessness.
I mean, if you can think of it as a way of trying, as their way of trying to get your reassurance, get your guidance, your good thinking, right?
Yes.
So if they're saying this, no, I want the pink cup, and you can actually listen and say, oh yeah, I know, but I've poured this drink now and we're going to have the blue cup. And then if they cry, that is actually a good way for them to work through their feelings and let that fear and tension go while you listen to them and you support them. And that's the reassurance that they're kind of looking for, that you're still there and you're still tuning to them. You're still listening to them despite all of this stuff that, might be going on around.
Absolutely. And there's, no right or wrong way to play those moments, right? Like you may decide that what your child needs is that warm, loving limit of like, oh yeah, and this is the blue cup. Yeah, I poured it in that one. Or maybe they need you to listen and go, oh, did you want the pink today? And I poured it in the blue. Should we get the pink? Right? So there's no right or wrong way to play that. We can go with our gut of what it is our child needs. But if you find your child bumping up, maybe they just need to know that you hear them, and they need to have you get that pink cup in that moment to know like not everything's going to be wrong with the world. Right?
Right.
But maybe what they need, if you're getting a lot of irrational requests, is that limit to be set so that they can get some of that yuck out. So it's kind of like a real listening to them in terms of listening to their need too, right?
And I think as parents, that can be hard. When something's shaken us, it can be really hard to then think, well, this is my responsibility now, to make sure this little one is still feeling cared for and protected. And I think one of the best ways to do that, though, is to really concentrate on that moment in hand, right? To be there and to notice, hopefully something that's going well, or to be responsive to the pink cup. That helps to kind of center you as well. And just focus on that relationship that you have, that might be trying in that moment, but this is your everyday, this is your reality right now, and that you can get as much out of that as you can.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. To be in that present moment with your child, because they need you. And the truth is we need them, right? Because all of us need to be reconnected to love and hope in these moments. These moments are great stealers of hope. It's part of what happens for us in these moments of crisis is we get so hopeless. We get so hurt. We can't see any good. And so to be able to recenter yourself and let your child play and remember that even though something incredibly dark has happened, you can still have a moment of play or love or care with your child. It's actually a huge gift, as hard as it can be, absolutely, right? It can be a huge gift to be present in that moment, yes.
And you talk there about, that sense of lack of goodness. But actually a family is a good way to kind of pull back some of that goodness into your immediate surroundings. But then what can you do as a family to kind of instill this feeling of good, put goodness back into the world, I suppose?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I love that, because one of the ways we work ourselves out of that feeling of hopelessness is action, right? And that kind of loving together action that we can accomplish as a family of these people were hurt in that earthquake, and what can we do as a family, right? Or this happened, or just somebody had something bad happen to them today. Is there something we could do, right? And children might say, let's pick flowers for them. And even though you can't send that person flowers, right? To go and pick those flowers, because it helps to feel like we can matter in this world. And in just the act of listening to your child and rebuilding hope for you and for them, even if you don't mail the flowers that you picked from your garden or the sidewalk, it still matters to try to matter. Yeah.
And to feel like you have momentum, that you're moving forward, that you're continuing.
Yeah, and kids will sometimes come up with incredible ideas, some of which you really can act upon. And it's really a beautiful thing to follow that through,
Yes, and doing it together, that sense of, family togetherness is that can really form some milestone moments, actually.
Yes. And for all of us going through these hard times, I just want to also end with one last thought that I know is very near and dear to Patty's heart and to all of us at Hand in Hand, which is that we can really get very fractured as a society when these things happen, and we take sides sometimes, and there's a lot of blame sometimes, and we can think that someone has been really evil, or that something horrible has happened, which indeed it has. And while there are hard feelings and there is darkness, the truth of the matter is that getting stuck in those feelings causes a tremendous amount of stress and tension for everyone, and hopelessness, as we talked about. So in this moment of connecting with our children and listening to them and rebuilding hope.
And doing these acts of caring, right? Making
Yeah.
caring happen again.
Exactly. I love that. Making caring happen again. I love that, Elle. You know, we're focusing in that moment on building a world that can hold subtleties and doesn't just pit people against people, or companies or events. And we start right here, right now, with our parenting and listening to our children and helping them matter and helping all of us each help each other rebuild hope together. And, you know, that work that we do as parents, that's what fosters that change and helps us be the change we wish to see in the world. And so for all of you here listening to this Hand in Hand podcast, that is truly why we work at Hand in Hand. It's why we do this. It's why we share these ideas, because we believe in a world where people can listen to each other even when they have opposing views, and when people can learn to care and help people be heard, so that hopefully there's less anger and less hopelessness in the world. And there will always be hard times. And it's our belief that in coming together, that is our best hope. And sometimes are just hard. And we're sorry for that.
So nice, you said. For any of you that are interested in the ideas that we mentioned here, as Abigail said, they're really the thinking that came from our founder, Paddy Whitler. They're available in several different posts. I'll put those in our show notes. Do let us know what you're feeling, if this was any help to you, if you need support, do just let us know.
Yeah, and if you have other ideas, definitely feel free to leave them on our Facebook page. Your thoughts may help others. So we are all in this together, and we really mean that. So thank you for everything that you guys do. I personally thank Hand in Hand for everything that Hand in Hand does, and together we rise. So thank you.
Thank you. See you next week.
Bye.